Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The rain had just started to fall when I realized something was missing, not from the sky, but from my heart. You know that moment when you're lying in bed next to someone you used to love, and the silence between you is louder than any fight you've ever had? That was my every night. My name's Elena, and I used to believe marriage was forever. But forever feels like a long time when you're invisible in your own home. Jacob, my husband of 7 years, used to touch my back softly in the morning and whisper, "Good morning, sunshine." Now, he barely grunts as he grabs his phone and walks out the door. Work, deadlines, phone calls. I became an afterthought. And when I tried to talk to him, really talk to him, it was like trying to hold water in my hands. He'd slip through with a nod, a sigh, or that distracted look that crushed me more than any argument ever could. I wasn't looking to feel anything. I wasn't planning to fall into something forbidden. But then came Aaron, Jacob's best friend. Our best man at the wedding. The guy who always stayed a little too long at family dinners, who remembered my favorite wine, who actually looked at me when I spoke. It started with a smile. A real one. The kind that makes you feel seen. And when he asked me, "Are you okay?" I nearly broke. Because for the first time in years, someone actually waited for the answer. We weren't supposed to be alone that night. Jacob had a last-minute business trip, and Aaron came by to drop off the keys to their cabin, some leftover plan they had from their college days. It was supposed to be a quick handoff. Just polite conversation, a drink, and go. But somehow, I ended up pouring my heart out by the fireplace, the glow warming my skin as his eyes searched mine like he was reading pages no one had touched in years. And when he reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, it wasn't lust I felt. It was life. It was the moment I realized I'd been starving, not for touch, but for presence. For meaning. For someone to choose me even when I didn't ask to be chosen. But the fire only burns until morning comes. And when it did, Jacob's name lit up my phone. And my world began to split in two. The morning light was cruel. It spilled through the curtains like a silent witness, illuminating the space between me and Aaron on that worn leather couch. My sweater hung off one shoulder, his jacket still draped over my legs. We hadn't crossed any lines that couldn't be uncrossed, but emotionally, we were already on the other side. I looked at him as he stirred awake. His eyes, soft, almost unsure, met mine, and something passed between us. Guilt. Relief. Maybe both. "I should go," I whispered, though I didn't move. "You don't have to," he said quietly, his voice still heavy with sleep. "Unless you want to." And that was it, the difference between them. Jacob never gave me a choice anymore. Everything with him had become routine, timed, calculated. Love used to be spontaneous with us, messy dinners, late-night road trips, falling asleep tangled in each other. But lately, we were strangers sharing a calendar. I remember when we first met. Jacob was ambitious, charming. He used to say I was his calm in the storm. But the storm never passed, and over the years, I became something he walked through to get to the next thing. Aaron sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Last night was different," he said, cautiously. I nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. It was real. He waited, watching me, as if hoping I'd say more. I didn't. Not yet. Later that day, Jacob came home. His hug felt forced. His eyes were on his phone even as he kissed my cheek. I studied him quietly. Was he ever going to notice I was drifting away? That someone else had looked into my soul and stayed long enough to see something still alive there. That evening, I watched him laugh at something on the TV, sipping the beer I had left out for him. I used to feel pride in these small gestures, but now they just stung. He didn't ask about my night. He didn't ask anything at all. And somewhere deep inside me, a small crack widened. Aaron had texted just once, "You okay?" I hadn't replied. But I reread it 5 times, and I felt it every time. The days that followed were a slow burn, like watching a candle melt one drip at a time, never knowing when the flame might reach the end. Jacob hadn't noticed a thing. Or maybe he hadn't chose to ignore it. That was his pattern lately, pretending everything was fine as long as the house was clean and dinner was made. He thought silence was peace, not realizing it had become the heaviest weight between us. We barely touched anymore. Not in anger. Not in passion. Not even in passing. One night, he brushed my hand accidentally while reaching for the remote. I flinched. He didn't notice. The thing is, it wasn't about Aaron. Not really. It was about everything Jacob and I stopped being. And how someone else had reminded me what it felt like to be chosen, not just tolerated. That weekend, we went to a friend's engagement party. The kind of event we used to love. There was dancing, champagne, soft fairy lights tangled in tree branches. But Jacob spent most of the night in the corner, talking shop with colleagues. I stood alone under the stars, watching couples sway to music I barely heard. Then I saw him, Aaron. He hadn't told me he would be there. He didn't approach right away. He just watched from across the patio, his expression unreadable. And I didn't look away. When our eyes finally met, the air seemed to shift. My chest tightened. He looked at me the way people look at things they've lost and still long for. And in that moment, I felt it again, that ache to be seen, to be wanted without being needed. Later, when I stepped away from the crowd, I heard footsteps behind me. "You look beautiful tonight," Aaron said, quietly. My heart stuttered. "Don't," I whispered. "Please." "I'm not trying to make this harder," he said. "But I can't pretend I don't feel it. And I don't think you can either." I turned away. "It's complicated." "It doesn't have to be." That's when Jacob appeared. His voice, too loud, too casual. "Hey, there you are." He smiled at Aaron, completely unaware. "Glad you made it, man." Aaron stepped back, the warmth in his eyes gone in an instant. The mask returned. And Jacob, still holding his beer, wrapped his arm around me, possessive and performative. Like he remembered for a second that I was his, but had no idea what that meant anymore. That night, I lay beside my husband, wide awake. I could hear his breathing, slow, steady, comfortable. But mine was shallow. Uneasy. Because I knew something had changed. And no one was saying it out loud. Yet. That night, sleep was a stranger. I lay awake beside Jacob, listening to the hollow rhythm of our shared space, a quiet void filled with everything we no longer said. My fingers traced the edge of the blanket, searching for something solid, something real to hold on to. But all I found was emptiness. My mind was tangled in Aaron's words, his eyes, the way he saw me, not as a wife stuck in a crumbling marriage, but as Elena, a woman still capable of feeling, of wanting. Desire had crept back into me quietly, a secret flame licking at the edges of my heart, stirring long-buried dreams. Yet, it came tangled with confusion and guilt, a bittersweet ache that made every breath feel heavier. Jacob rolled over, his face still turned away. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to bridge this growing canyon between us, but my hands froze. How do you touch a ghost? The days blurred, and with every stolen glance from Aaron, the world shifted. His presence was a balm and a wound, reminding me of what I'd lost and what I still dared to hope for. But hope was dangerous. One afternoon, Aaron found me at the edge of the lake, the cold water reflecting my fractured reflection. "You're slipping away," he said softly, not accusing, just observing. "I don't know who I am anymore," I admitted. "Or what I want." He stepped closer, hesitation in every movement. "Maybe you just need to remember." Remember. The word echoed in my mind like a haunting refrain. Remember who I was before the silence. Before the loneliness. Before the walls closed in. That night, Jacob and I sat at opposite ends of the dinner table. Words floated around us, but none bridged the space. My heart screamed for connection, for honesty. Instead, I swallowed the questions, the pain, and the dangerous promise of what Aaron could be. I was caught between two worlds, the safe, familiar lie I'd built with Jacob, and the raw, unpredictable pull of something new and terrifying. And as I lay in bed that night, the silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was breaking. Just when I thought the quiet between Jacob and me was the worst kind of danger, life threw something darker into the mix. It started with a text. A message from Aaron late one evening, brief and strange: "We need to talk. There's something you don't know." My heart thudded, caught between dread and curiosity. What could he be hiding? The next night, Aaron met me at the cabin again, but this time the atmosphere was charged with something different, more urgent, more dangerous. His usual warmth was replaced by a guarded intensity that made my skin prickle. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," he said, eyes flickering with hesitation. "There's more going on with Jacob than you realize." I blinked, confusion swirling. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Jacob's been keeping secrets. Things that could destroy everything you think you know about him, and about us." My mind raced. Betrayal was already a bitter taste in my mouth, but this was something else entirely. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, heart pounding. "Because I'm part of it," Aaron confessed. "And because I can't stand by and watch you get hurt." The words struck me like a blow. Part of it? How? What could Aaron possibly have to do with Jacob's secrets? I searched his eyes, desperate for answers, but he only shook his head, unwilling to say more. Not yet. That night, lying awake again, my world splintered further. I felt the weight of invisible chains tightening around my heart, chains forged by lies, longing, and a betrayal I hadn't even begun to understand. Jacob, my husband, the man I vowed to love, was a stranger in our own home. And Aaron, the friend who'd become my refuge, was somehow tangled in the shadows I couldn't see. I wanted to confront Jacob, to demand the truth. But fear stopped me. Fear of what I might lose, and fear of what I might find. In the quiet darkness, I touched my phone, fingers trembling. I wanted to text Aaron, to beg for the full story, but words failed me. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, feeling more alone than ever. Because the line between love and betrayal had blurred beyond recognition, and I was trapped somewhere in between. The confrontation was inevitable. I found Jacob alone in the cabin's dim living room, the weight of silence pressing down like a storm about to break. His eyes met mine, tired, guarded, but unmistakably vulnerable. "I know," I said simply. He blinked, surprised. "Know what?" "That you've been hiding things. Secrets that have been tearing us apart." Jacob ran a hand through his hair, the walls finally cracking. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Then why?" My voice cracked with a mix of anger and heartbreak. He swallowed, looking away. "Because I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared that my past would ruin what we have." I stepped closer, heart pounding. "What past?" Jacob hesitated, then confessed quietly, "I made mistakes, things I tried to bury." "Aaron, He knows because it's his burden too. My breath caught. So Aaron wasn't just a friend or a distraction. They were tied in ways I never imagined. The room thickened with tension, not just from betrayal, but from a strange, raw honesty neither of us had dared reach before. I never stopped loving you, Jacob said, voice low. But I lost myself. And maybe I lost you too. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from anger, but from the aching truth in his words. Just then, the door creaked open. Aaron stepped in, eyes steady but full of pain. Elena, Jacob, I never meant for this to hurt anyone. But some things need to be faced. For the first time, the three of us stood together, not as enemies, but as broken pieces trying to find a way forward. And then, a quiet revelation from Aaron, I'm leaving town. I can't be part of this any longer. But I wanted you both to know, I always wanted what was best for you. Jacob nodded, and I realized something fundamental had shifted. The love I thought was lost wasn't gone. It was buried under years of silence and fear, waiting to be unearthed. The night ended not with answers, but with possibilities, a fragile, trembling hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild. Conclusion of, I spent the night with my husband's friend and felt alive again. Husband-wife relationship story. The days after that night felt surreal, as if I was moving through a dream where every step echoed with uncertainty, yet carried a strange sense of relief. Aaron left town quietly, his departure as discreet as his presence had been intense. The weight of his confession lingered in the air, but it cleared space for Jacob and me to finally confront what had been buried too long. We talked. Really talked, for the first time in years. Not just about mistakes and secrets, but about who we were beneath the layers of silence and hurt. Jacob was no longer just the man I married, he was someone I had to rediscover. And in that discovery, I found cracks and flaws but also a genuine desire to rebuild, to heal, and to forgive. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. I realized that love isn't about perfection or always having the answers. It's about showing up, even when the wounds are fresh and the trust is fragile. The night I spent with Aaron wasn't a betrayal, it was a wake-up call. A reminder that I am human, flawed, and deserving of feeling alive. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all, that sometimes, to find your way back, you have to first lose yourself. Jacob and I are still learning to navigate this new chapter. There are scars, yes, but also hope. And in the quiet moments, I can feel the pulse of something stronger beneath the surface. Love. Loyalty. Redemption. If this story touched you, or made you think about your own relationships and the delicate balance between love and betrayal, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you do in Elena's place? Would you want a sequel to see what happens next? Please share your reflections in the comments below. The rain was soft against the cabin window, a quiet soundtrack to the storm raging inside me. I sat by the fire, nursing a glass of red wine that had long since gone lukewarm, staring into the flickering flames as if they could burn away the ache I felt every time I thought about Jacob. Jacob, my husband of 7 years, was once the man who whispered promises in my ear, who held me like I was the only thing that mattered in the world. But lately, those whispers had become echoes from another lifetime. He was distant, distracted, wrapped up in his work and his phone more than in me. I could count the times in the last few months when he had truly looked at me with anything more than passing irritation or indifference. I felt invisible. That night was supposed to be ordinary. Jacob had flown out last minute on a business trip, and Aaron, Jacob's best friend since college, had come by to drop off the keys to their old cabin. Aaron was different from Jacob. Where Jacob had grown cold, Aaron still carried warmth. His smile was easy, his eyes attentive. And, more dangerously, he actually listened when I spoke. We talked for hours, the firelight painting shadows across his face. He asked how I was really doing. Not the polite, fine, everyone else accepted. I told him the truth, the loneliness, the frustration, the feeling of slipping away from the woman I once was. Aaron didn't judge. He just nodded and reached out, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. It was a simple touch, but it set my skin on fire. For the first time in years, I felt seen. We didn't cross any lines that night, not really, but the line had already started to blur. Morning came too quickly, bringing with it the harsh light of reality. Jacob's name flashed on my phone, a reminder that the world I knew was waiting for me outside the cabin. And yet, something inside me had shifted. Back home, the silence between Jacob and me was deafening. He didn't ask about my night, didn't notice the subtle change in me. I wanted to scream that I was hurting, that I needed more than the ghost of his love. But instead, I swallowed my pain. Days passed with stolen glances from Aaron, an unfinished sentence in his eyes, a brush of fingers too light to be accidental. My heart ached with the forbidden, and with the guilt that followed. I tried to convince myself it was just loneliness, a desperate grasp for feeling something real. But then came the engagement party, a gathering that was supposed to be joyful but only magnified the distance between Jacob and me. I stood alone under the glow of fairy lights, watching couples dance and laugh. Jacob was lost in conversation, absent from my world. That's when Aaron found me. He didn't say much, just a simple, "You look beautiful tonight." His words struck me like a spark, reminding me of the life I once wanted. Before I could respond, Jacob appeared, his arm wrapping around my waist with a possessiveness that felt like a mask, a claim. Aaron stepped back, the warmth in his eyes replaced by something guarded. That night, I lay awake, caught between two men and a crumbling marriage. I could hear Jacob's steady breathing beside me and feel the growing silence that separated us. Then came the text that changed everything: "We need to talk now." Aaron showed up at the house unannounced, the tension in his eyes impossible to ignore. And when Jacob walked in, the truth spilled out like wildfire. They weren't just friends. There was a secret, a history between them Jacob had kept hidden, a truth that pulled me deeper into the tangled web of love, betrayal, and desire. Caught in the storm of their revelation, I realized I was fighting not just for love but for my own truth. I was no longer the invisible wife or the lonely friend. I was a woman on the edge of something new, something terrifying and alive. And as the rain tapped against the window, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again.